Yeah, this is the quarterly indicators briefing held every quarter for quarter one of 2025, and it's just a review of employment, real estate development, and venture capital indicators in the county. And I'll just turn it over to the experts who provided their report and the special briefing on advanced manufacturing.
All right, well, looks like I'm kicking it off today. Hello. My name is Wesley Sirhan. I'm the research analyst at Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. To give you an introduction for the Q1 2025, what we're looking at in particular for the state of the economy this time is the classic thing when we're doing any economic reports. We're looking back in time, and in particular for this period, we're sort of looking at the water before impact. There's a lot that has been going on in the last 3 months, and this period of time that we're looking at here is before we started to see a lot of the large-scale federal layoffs begin to have a full impact. This is sort of the best that we can see as of right now. So what you're going to see here right above in the first slide here are kind of the main highlights and the main takeaways. So a lot of the things are things that are projections we had seen before. Office vacancy rates are continuing to increase, but so are median home prices continuing to increase. We also have seen a bit of a jump in the unemployment rate. The factors that have led to this in this instance are relatively consistent with what the nation is experiencing at the moment. I would also like to preface that for the unemployment rate, compared to the rest of the nation, we're actually still doing pretty well. We're a full percentage point under the national unemployment rate. And technically speaking, from an economist's position, 3% is under the natural rate of unemployment. So technically speaking, we could be considered overemployed still. Where that falls with current work hours and the current definition of unemployment, though, may reflect differently on the constituents. Also, venture capital had a bit of an increase overall in this period, but this is something we're going to touch on more when we look at the details of the venture capital. It's a very unique scene given the overall national trends of venture capital and how it's affecting our county.
Before you continue, can you please clarify what quarter one means, like the months for people watching?
Yes, I apologize. So quarter one is the month of January, February, and March, the first quarter of the year.
For the record, Ben Kraft, Montgomery County Planning. We have been including the weekly unemployment insurance claims now, because this is more of a topical issue than it's really been, almost, as far as many people can remember in Montgomery County. We also, what's showing here is different than what was published in the indicators report, because this is as close to kind of real-time data as we get. So there's no reason to, just stick to quarter one when we do this. So what we've done here is basically compared the first 25 weeks of 2024 to the first 25 weeks of 2025 with insurance claims, unemployment insurance claims for, the three main jurisdictions, which in this case are states, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia, just to show the magnitude of how different or how many more claims there have been the first 3 months of, or the first 25 weeks of 2025. And so really, because Maryland and Virginia are again, large, and on the left is, by the way, the initial claims. So that's first time separation from employment, and then continuing is, you are continuing to look for work, still haven't found a job. Maryland and Virginia as larger states have a lot else going on, are still affected by federal layoffs, but not as dramatically as Washington, D.C., which is close to both in initial claims and continuing claims. Is about double over these first 25 weeks the magnitude of claims that were compared to where they were the first 25 weeks of last year.
Can you please clarify when you say claims is based on where people, hello.
Yes.
Thank you. You're right here. It's based on where people work.
Exactly.
So can you talk about that? Because so in Montgomery County, people really need to look into the Washington,
Yeah.
D.C. claims versus the Maryland, which is probably mostly people who live in Baltimore and so on, right? Can you please talk about
yes.
that? Thank
There are quite, we can't tell for certain, but there are likely quite a few people in the Washington that live in Montgomery County that are included in the Washington D.C. number here because their workplace was in Washington D.C. So yeah, it's a place of work type issue. So there's definitely there's a definitely an impact there that's happening.
Thank you. I promise I won't interrupt every time. But I think that this is such an important issue. So have we've heard just anecdotally that we're hoping to get richer data from the state or a relationship with DC to find out where these folks live. Do you have any information on that?
I have not. I don't have that, nor have I received word about that data, but would be just equally as interested to see it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think, Mr. Ali, if we could try to follow up on that, because I've just heard anecdotally that there's movement in trying to get richer data.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay. Can we? I think this is a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so kind of following up on the detail and what I was talking about initially, trying to get a little bit closer to where we are right now with the data, as close as we can necessarily. We took a look at Warren, Maryland. So the way Warren, Maryland system works is this is a program run by the state government where there's a requirement by law whenever above, I believe it's 50 employees, whenever a company has to fire about 50 employees, that a company must register that beforehand, a mass firing beforehand. These companies can do this under or over. This also applies to federal agencies and any employer. So we took a look at Q1 and Q2 2024 and compared it, the first half of the year for 2024 and the first half of the year for 2025. What we've seen is a reasonable increase in the layoffs for 2025 and Q1. What was interesting to see is that following the layoffs, in particular the 2,200 layoffs from the Department of Health and Human Services, that in Q2, which would be April, May, and June, apologies, I'm doing a calendar test right now. What in those months, what we saw was that in 2025, we didn't see a very significant increase in the number of firings compared to the same 3 months in 2024. In fact, when we were taking a look at it, there was a slight indication there may have been a bit of a lower amount than in Q2 2024. So it looks like where the impacts from the federal workers, as of right now, it may not be spreading, but this is of course a very temporary, this is a small snapshot. This is just kind of reading the ripples, but we're not sure if they're done or where they're at.
Okay. Yeah. So just in other words, the big hit came in the first quarter. The reason that these first 6 months of the year in 2025 are so much higher in terms of layoffs and plant closures it mostly happened in the first quarter. That included the about almost 1,400 USAID contract employees working for contractors that were laid off, and also the 2,200 Health and Human Services workers that were laid off. So that's, yeah, really just a very large wave in the first quarter of 2025. So we'll keep monitoring that, and you can move on. I think turn it back over.
Yeah. So looking at kind of shifting focus over to vacancy rates and rent for the different spaces inside of Montgomery County, we saw a lot of trends continue from before. Slight increases in vacancy from office spaces, slight increase in vacancy from retail, higher increases in rent prices in the office, increases in the gross rent in office and in retail space, and then a slight increase in industrial space vacancy with a decrease in the rent right now. So a bit of an interesting trend, but overall, for office and retail, a lot of what we had come to see before.
And just a reminder, the committee is going to be taking on the retail study in the fall. So we're going to be digging a lot into this data then. Okay, that's all.
And then expanding this a little bit more, we took a look at where we stand for office vacancy compared to neighboring jurisdictions. We kind of fell a little bit kind of in the middle per se of the pack. We are ahead in, we have greater office vacancy than the greater state of Maryland, slightly greater than the Washington MSA, so the greater metropolitan area, DC, parts of North Virginia, and South Maryland. But we are doing better than Arlington County, Alexandria, Fairfax. So ahead of some of the bigger Virginia counties, a little bit behind DC and neighboring.
I'm going to have Councilmember Glass ask a question, but very quickly, on this is why this committee pushed for the office to housing conversion. And as so far, we have about 6 applicants or 6 people very interested on doing these conversions. So I feel very hopeful.
Thank you for this. I have a question about, I guess, Q1, right? The Washington metro area, is that weighted, or is that just the simple average of all the jurisdictions in the region?
It would reflect the whole inventory for the region.
So it would be
Yes.
weighted
Yes.
then?
Yes.
Okay.
Weighted, yeah.
Because again, right, Alexandria City has far fewer property than Fairfax and Montgomery County, and so just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with residential building, there's one key indicator that we want to emphasize here, which is that the royal blue bar for the first quarter of 2025 at the top, and how almost non-existent it is. We have, so it's showing basically 7 multifamily units permitted in the first quarter of 2025. If you add that up with the previous 3 months, the last quarter of 2024, where there were, I think, 8 units permitted. So we're at the 7 it's a long story. It should be 8, but that one will come in the next quarter. But at any rate, our multifamily permits have been for 6 months incredibly low, basically not happening. And so that is just an indicator that we're going to watch. We know that there are national trends where multifamily is having trouble. Interest rates are high. However, this seems quite a bit lower than where we've traditionally been in a while. So that is something that we'll keep our eye on and see if it goes another quarter.
The townhouses is the 210, right? I'm looking at the screen, but I want to make sure I'm getting the color right. That's too many
yes,
booths, 210.
yes,
Yeah, and that actually makes sense because more builders are actually they're focusing on townhouses.
Yeah.
So,
And the multifamily that are permitted, the 7, they're actually stacked flats. They're 2 over 2, so they're a lot like townhouses, and they're being permitted as multifamily. So really in the sense of like traditional multifamily high-rise buildings, there haven't been any of those permits. So, yeah.
And I don't know if the PHP committee has had this conversation, but what would be helpful for me, and I think for the broader conversation that this will spark, is what the multifamily permitting is for our neighboring jurisdictions as well, to see that trend for future consideration.
Sure. Okay, we can move on. Okay. Back to you.
Yes. All right. So looking into venture capital, kind of like I mentioned before, what you're seeing here reflects where I was saying when we got into the weeds of what our venture capital totals were, maybe not the initial picture you were thinking of overall. So vast majority of the chunk of venture capital that came in for Q1 came from a sort of topping off of the original X Energy deal. They had about 182 million in additional investments from an outside investor add on top of their investment from Amazon, or Amazon increased their original investment. I apologize. They had their original increased by $182 million. What they represent the bulk of it. What you see here in the venture capital deals and for the remaining 4 deals, these are much smaller, and this is representing a broader national trend. I believe in the next slide you'll see the overall graph. But what's really interesting is that we're looking at we're following the national trend where VC overall is having a bit of a decrease in the overall amount of funding. A large part of this is because interest rates are higher. So for a lot of investors, venture capital is a very risky deal. And you do this because there's high interest rates, high returns from venture capital. But when there's more secure investments that have higher interest rates that have higher interest rates kind of more guaranteed than venture capital, it's going to be a more attractive investment, and venture capital in these periods tend to decrease. But what's interesting is that for these low volume investments, this represents a large range of different kinds of businesses. So we're kind of looking at the seeds over the blooming flower in this case. There's a lot of potential here. These companies represent a rather wide potential industry base, honestly.
And just this is actually good. Sorry, it's a good transition. So X Energy, that was you don't have to go back, but the top deal there was it's a nuclear energy company. Has something to do with designing nuclear reactors, which it's going to kind of lead into what we're talking about, which is the actual making things in Montgomery County, and really almost things that we kind of think of as industrial. And also of note is X Energy did lease about 25,000 feet of office space in Montgomery County along, kind of simultaneously with that deal. So they're contributing to the office market also. But
Can I just interrupt 1 second, Ben? There will be a much larger announcement coming regarding X Energy very soon, so much higher than 25,000. So very soon we'll be able to announce it. So yeah, we've been working with them for a long time. We're very excited about it. So yeah.
So really picking up off of that, I'm going to talk about manufacturing and land use in Montgomery County. We were asked to look into this at the last meeting, and it was very timely because I know this committee and any Montgomery County economy watcher for a long time has known that we need to diversify. It's obviously much more urgent now. So that part of, I think, the good news is that we have a base to go on for diversification. And I'll talk about that, kind of put that there as a little bit of a teaser. But first, what is helpful is to go over the land use implications for manufacturing, because that's where we're going to talk about this potential diversification. But, it's not something that we've really dealt with very much in Montgomery County. It's been offices, it's been, that traditional type of work for our economy. So first, going to give a pretty broad overview of land use and manufacturing and industrial use in general. And so just very broadly, we have planning 3 zoning families that can accommodate manufacturing. The first 2, employment and commercial residential, often called CR, are they're more of the, now they have most of our actual manufacturing employment and establishments or activity in the county. They tend to be, they're more mixed use zones where you can actually have retail, residential, kind of depends on the formula that's usually spelled out in the particular parcel from the master plan. Now our industrial zones are actually more restrictive in the sense that they do not allow residential uses and limit retail uses more. Really, essentially what they are is kind of preservation. And that's where the mode that we tend to be on for our industrial lands, which actually don't have a lot of manufacturing activity on them. Now they have very important industrial functions on them, repair, auto shops, tradespeople shops, but tend not to be where our actual manufacturing is. It's just from the table, you can see that most of the employment, the establishments, and the estimate of total annual wages comes from those employment and commercial residential zones. Another note is just that the employment zones are kind of getting phased out. This is like EOF, we call it, employment office. Life Science Center Zone. Now, the one exception there is for the Great Seneca Plan, which we recently, we preserved the Life Science Zone because the whole, purpose there is life sciences. It was modified a little for the overlay to allow for a different mix of uses. But for the most part, it will become commercial residential in most of the master plans, and industrial. I talked to one of our zoning people and who's been here for 14 years and has never seen something actually zoned into industrial. So it's really it's kind of, most of our master plans are thinking about what balance do we want to strike in preserving that industrial land. But we've got overall with our manufacturing employment, so the employment is just looking at manufacturing. We've got almost 10,000 employees on this land, over 400 establishments, and over $1.2 billion in annual wages. And it comes out to about a little over $126,000 per employee per year. That's probably a little high. The classification I used for this was pretty broad. I included our R&D sector, which in a lot of ways is very like manufacturing. In most of our R&D is life sciences. Lab settings are like manufacturing in that they deal with physical things. They even have industrial processes. They have a technical, like they have technicians working at them. And in a lot of cases, they actually will do manufacturing and R&D in the same setting. It's impossible from this data to tell, to parse each facility out and say exactly what they're doing. So I just kind of captured everything that could potentially be manufacturing, but a lot of it could be just office, computer number crunching R&D. So that's just something to keep in mind. But we can go to the next one. So this is looking at the same zones, but looking at land area rather than just the numbers of people there. And so overall, we've got about 1,200 acres of zoning that can accommodate manufacturing. Most of that, again, is combined in the employment and commercial residential zones. The average is about 8 employees per acre on these zones. And again, it's a higher employment density in the commercial residential employment than in the industrial, and a little over $1 million in manufacturing wages annually per acre. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you a comparison right now of what is a similar an acre of, let's say, office employment or something like that, or retail, because it gets very difficult to again, parse that out, I would assume that a lot of it tracks with property values. The higher value property, for example, in like downtown Bethesda with large office buildings, is probably going to be also pay higher wages per acre. But it's quite a dense, high value, high very productive land. So we can move on.
So can we assume that the R&D and bioscience industrial, would most of those be in the employment, commercial, residential?
They are in, yes, the biomanufacturing and almost all of, I'm kind of hesitating a little bit, but now I'm going to say yes. All of what you're talking about, life sciences, biotech, is all going to be in employment and commercial residential. It won't be in industrial.
So when we think of the industrial acres, and in the prior slide, that is would you say that that's typically what we think of industrial, like non-bio-industrial?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but it tends to be. I mean, I guess it's when the public, I think, thinks of industrial, right. Yeah, you think of an auto manufacturing in Detroit and smokestacks, and that's really not what our industrial land is like.
I'll just jump in as well. So in addition to the life sciences manufacturing production facilities that we have, don't forget we also have Hughes Network Systems and Rada Technologies. So we have some of these technology-based companies that are manufacturing satellites and things like that on the land here as well. So it's not just tied to the life sciences, so I don't want us to get hung up on that. But there are a lot of those high-wage paying jobs that are in that, the satellite production and things like that as well. So.
Yeah, and we'll get to that a little bit also. So this is, it's hard to kind of read at this resolution, this map, but what this is showing is that the yellow is the zones that actually would permit manufacturing in the county. It's not a lot of acreage. It's very, very concentrated. And the purple bubbles are the size, the number of manufacturing employees held on that zone. So, a lot of the yellow space does not have any. It's just other sorts of commercial or other industrial uses, but it's again a little bit hard to see. But the biggest bubbles are really in that life sciences area, which is between Rockville and Gaithersburg, and I've not included those in this analysis because they do their own independent zoning. I've only included what Montgomery County and Montgomery Planning are responsible for zoning and land use for. So it's that life sciences area, and then it's basically Germantown and Clarksburg, where the big bubbles are, where our manufacturing, which is essentially all what people would call advanced manufacturing or high-tech manufacturing.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, I can ask a question. Yes, I can. Yeah. I felt powerful for 1 second. As you were doing this research, what was the conversation between you guys and MCPS, for example? Because they have the three schools, right? They have the Thomas Edison School, and I want to make sure that all the jobs that we're talking about here, especially the high-paying jobs that we have, that we are indeed making sure that we're connecting our students into those jobs. So how does that work? Does it, and do you have the data to say, for example, let's say we graduated 50 students from Thomas Edison High School in their, one of the trades that they have, mechanics or whatever, how can we make sure that we know that we're tracking where they're gonna end up working, and if so, in which area here in the county? Is that work being done?
At MCPS, we have not engaged with specifically. I do think, though, what you're saying, like that side of this needs to be much more thoroughly explored. I have had some very good conversations with representatives from Montgomery College, however, and they have the Hughes facility right on their campus. And so they really are doing, and they have as far as I know, they have a biomanufacturing, kind of technician program. So I think that they are doing, it's not to say that MCPS isn't and can't do that, but that I think they're really doing a lot. And again, I think they should absolutely be part of that future, workforce and training conversation.
Right, and we do work very closely with WorkSource Montgomery on that talent pipeline and developing that pipeline. And we know not everyone is going to go to college, and there are lots of apprenticeship programs and things like that that would be tied directly to some of these employers in the more industrial zones. And we do partner with them, and I know that WorkSource Montgomery works very closely with MCPS, Montgomery College, and the universities at Shady Grove to make sure that whole ecosystem is aware of the opportunities and the employers that we already have here that have, are hiring in those positions. So.
Yeah, and we had a session here a while back last year with MCPS and Worksession Montgomery talking about this, but I want to make sure that we connect the dots. Maybe for the next economic development indicators that we have, we just need to make sure that MCPS and Worksession Montgomery shares their data with you guys. Whatever they have, to see how we can track the people that are graduating from Montgomery County and staying in Montgomery County, and how much money, if possible, how much they're making. Because as you just mentioned, not everybody's gonna go to college, and that's okay. My brothers did not go to college, and they make more money than me. And it's fine, and we want them to stay here, but we need that data. So let's make sure that happens. All right,
Sure,
thank
we'll
you.
follow up. You can move on. Yep. So this map just highlights basically what was in the previous map, just in more of a qualitative way, so you can really see how the density of manufacturing employment is concentrated in the county. And so that just to the left of 270 there, that's that big yellow dot is the life sciences center. So that's mostly going to be the life sciences related manufacturing. And then when you get up to the Germantown and Clarksburg dot, that is, there's a lot of life science biomanufacturing up there, but there's also this other satellite and advanced communications technology sector that Lori mentioned that is really heavily concentrated up there. And I'll be speaking a little bit about that. So you can go ahead. So this is just the one, an overview of looking at the different types of industrial uses and the age of the building, or the kind of, it's just to kind of an indication of what kind of facilities we need and will need in the future. This average year built is probably a little low, actually probably quite a bit low, because it just averaged out, every single industrial building in the county, where when you look at that advanced manufacturing group in the top, those are, for the most part, those are going to take place, and I'll show this with some a different set of data. But those are going to that's going to occur in buildings that are generally built like after 2000 in large flex spaces. But because we have such a large inventory overall of smaller buildings, that's what's happening to the average age. Anyway, so those advanced manufacturing sectors, the scientific R&D, the metals, machinery, and electronics. Now that, again, we don't make cars, we don't make steel, we don't have, but what we have is these very high-tech advanced satellite and other electronic communication systems. So that's what's in that 33 code for us. And then for the next one, 32, we don't really do much of anything in that overall category except for that pharmaceutical piece. And so those are our advanced manufacturing sectors, and they're going to be in the newest buildings, even though this probably dramatically kind of lowers their age. Then you get to our industrial buildings, and most of that is not manufacturing. It's very important industrial work, and again, a lot of it's good jobs, but it's going to be much older buildings, much smaller. The kind of the lower value of the manufacturing, but maybe once were newer, higher value manufacturing a long time ago, but then get filtered into being places where auto shops can be, where where carpenters can have their workshops, and HVAC, and then warehousing, wholesale kind of trade, any sort of logistics tends to be in these places, as we discussed, and they tend to be older. And then even when you get into our food, beverage, what sometimes are called non-durable manufacturing, a lot of it's meant for like bakeries is a great example. It's meant for local distribution and consumption, not exported. So again, tends to be in these lower value buildings, but doesn't mean it's like a lower value thing to do. We all need it. It's just that the space isn't as valuable. And then and then there's obviously the kind of extractive industries, which we don't have much of, but those are going to be the kind of oldest land uses. So yeah.
For Miss Lori Boyer-Bad, did I say that right? Based on the conversations that you have been having in the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and possible employers, possible people who can come here in Montgomery County, what have you heard in terms of needs, in terms like, let's say you're a manufacturer and you want to come to Montgomery County, what kind of challenges are they telling you that we should be thinking of to fix and make it easier for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the biggest challenges, and I think Ben has touched on this a couple of times, is we don't have a lot of manufacturing space. So, we haven't added any new industrial zoning in 14 years, at least, in the county. So, when some of our life sciences companies, for instance, are through the R&D phase and now they're ready to manufacture a product, we don't have a 50,000 square foot warehouse industrial facility that they can move into, which is why we often see some of those companies open a manufacturing site in Frederick County, because there's more manufacturing space there. So that is one of the bigger challenges that we find when we're talking to those companies. Also, some folks need 20 acres of land. Because if it's a secure facility, a lot of these satellite companies need to be on secure facilities that are not at a road front, they don't want the visibility, things like that. And again, we don't have a lot of vacant land sites where somebody could come in and put a secure manufacturing facility and have those types of securities that they need.
Great. And for planning, are you guys doing an analysis, like a countywide analysis on where we should probably start putting light science industry zones in the county? Is that something that you guys are working on right now? Or?
Well, the beginnings of it are in probably a couple slides. We're going to kind of hint at that, and then, but it's definitely something that we will be expanding on. We have 2 master plans going on that are going to touch on that, but also, yes, countywide. So I think we can move to, it's a great segue into what we're going into. So just to sum up, the industrial zoned land is very important, but it's the older buildings, smaller spaces, lower rents, we're in preservation mode with those, don't want to reserve them, don't want to keep our land at lower values than they need to be, but also don't want to, not have any auto repair shops in the entire county. Also a lot of this land is just not going, as Lori was saying, is not going to be able to accommodate the kind of manufacturing that we're going to be getting. It's just not big enough. You can't assemble enough parcels. It's not secure enough. So I looked initially at, this is just a look at matching current CoStar data for industrial and flex buildings with our parcel file, just to get an idea of kind of age and size of parcels of manufacturing facilities based on the area. And so what I basically did was take the map with the employment concentration and say, so I separated out the Life Sciences Center and then Germantown and Clarksburg. So if those were your addresses, I separated you from here, and then there's the rest of the county. And so first just looked at the buildings built in year 2000 or later, and Germantown, Clarksburg, and the Life Sciences Center, I think, no surprise, everything built there is built more recently, but also they still have, nearly double the number of industrial or flex buildings built after 2000, where then the rest of the county does. The rest of the county has only 23. In those areas, they have 37 of them. So that's where this is concentrated. Again, they had the land at that time. No one else did. Now, also looking, just if we look at the average parcel and building size, and we're looking at any construction year here, but these, obviously it'll be skewed later when you get into the Germantown, Clarksburg, and life sciences area. To get to what Lori was saying, the later we go, the larger sites that manufacturing companies are needing. And this goes for life sciences, it goes for the advanced satellite and communication. So in the Germantown, Clarksburg, and life sciences area, you're at almost 7.5 acres per parcel that holds one of these industrial or flex spaces. And you're over 70,000 square feet for the building, whereas the rest of the county you're at 3.75 acres, and then about 30,000 square feet for the building. And these, a lot of what these buildings are, especially very recently, that these companies tend to call them flex spaces because that's exactly what they want, is this flexibility. It tends to be basically a shell, very high ceilings that they can then fit in whatever way they might want to do some R&D, have some offices, but also have a big area where they can do prototyping, some sort of small batch manufacturing, and also be able to change that as their needs change. So that really is kind of the type of thing that we would see here. We're not going to see a giant, assembly line auto plant or something like that. We're going to see this more specialized type of manufacturing, and you need a big space for that. So we can move on. This is just looking at, out of this data set, looking at the year built range for our industrial flex building stock. And now I think it's almost 300 buildings were built before 1980 out of this stock, which is more than half. And I think the more important part is that after 2010, it's a very significant decline in these industrial flex spaces getting built. Now, there might be something just nationally to that, maybe fewer buildings, maybe because they need larger spaces, they're able to do more in that space. So I don't want to say that this is all a Montgomery County phenomenon, but definitely there's a marked slowdown in industrial and flex space building, also because we really don't have much land. And so I'll talk about this sector in a second. Yeah. That's why we need our nuclear energy startups. So we have the Clarksburg plan and we have the Germantown plan going on right now. These are issues that we are definitely looking at in both of these plans. At least for Clarksburg, to be frank, there isn't much. There's the ComStat site, and there's really just not much else. Germantown's much more about the downtown area. So, but we will be kind of doing an inventory and seeing, what do we have that could potentially accommodate this? And yes, also outside of that, what do we have that can accommodate this type of land? So I'll be, carrying on this research to do that. In several different as part of several different projects, and then. Finally, just to kind of put a cap on what Lori was saying about the satellite and advanced communications industry. So everybody that knows me is sick of hearing me talk about this because I actually never shut up about this industry because it's like, it's like been hiding in plain sight. There's almost 2,500 employees. Just this list of the kind of 5 largest companies here, Hughes, DRS Rada, Wabtec, actually what they do here kind of counts in that sector. And these are all in Germantown or Clarksburg. And, occupying these types of spaces, we have an incredibly high, a couple issues ago, I talked about the location quotients. We have these have around a location quotient of close to 10, this industry, which is incredibly high. That means we're much more concentrated in this industry than, we're 10 times the average concentration in this industry. And so I think that MCEDC has a study coming out where they are going to be targeting, the satellite and advanced communications will be a targeted industry. So I'm excited that we can really, get going on, really recognizing and spreading the word that this is a really competitive industry and a good, if we're going to diversify or think about that, this is kind of sitting there as something that we can go. And not to dismiss life sciences. I mean, they're also very important. It's just that we talk about them a lot here. This industry deserves its its recognition also. So I think that really ends our presentation for today.
Yeah, so I just want to thank you for this. It's always great to see you all, and it's always great. The data is always very rich, so I appreciate that. But I just want to double down on the point that you were making in terms of technology, this specific type of technology, and I just wanted to mention that MCDC a couple months ago at our board meeting had a site selector presentation, which everybody in the world should see this presentation. It's so fantastic, and the issue was that technology, it's low hanging fruit, particularly for our workforce and the companies that are already here. And so I think that absolutely we need to double down on technology, and so I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
And just to add to that, as you start your marketing campaign, telling people all about it, I think it's a great opportunity to again engage with MCPS and Montgomery College and get more students on that track. I think it's a responsibility to ensure people not just graduate from school system, but stay in Montgomery County and follow and keep that data. But that's fabulous. I'm so happy that we had this session today. Do you have a...
Yeah, thank you for all the data and thoughtful conversation. I wanted to go back to the point about the industrial zoning. And as companies continue to grow or identify Montgomery County as a place they want to do that work but can't do that work, what discussions outside of this committee or this body have been had, and what recommendations might you suggest in order to square that circle?
So we talk with planning regularly, especially as they're going through some of their master plan updates. And I have voiced my concerns about the ComSat site and the need to keep that for commercial uses, that it should not solely be residential, that is the largest parcel of land that we have, that when RFIs are coming our way about large projects, that's the parcel that we submit. That's the one that we have that can accommodate a large campus-like setting for a life sciences company or a manufacturing use that wants to bring, hundreds of jobs to the county. So we have been pretty vocal about our desire for that to retain at least part of that parcel, to retain that commercial usage so that we can direct some of those projects there. I'll also say we talk a lot with the developers and builders about being creative about where they want to build projects. 700 Progress Way in Gaithersburg. Matin built a tilt-up spec facility, and AstraZeneca ended up moving their manufacturing site into that 150,000 square foot spec building. And that was something that we don't typically see developers do in this county. But Matin has done a lot of those types of projects in Frederick County and in Virginia. So we were kind of excited to see them do that first project here in Montgomery County as a spec facility, and to be able to land AstraZeneca, their biomanufacturing site there in that site. So we're having those conversations with developers in addition to planning, about looking creatively about what zoning could you put a building in that would accommodate this. Minkoff development at the Seneca Meadows Corporate Center up in Germantown is a great example of, a lot of the single story or 2 or 3 story buildings that can accommodate these types of things. So it's looking at how can we creatively put facilities into commercially zoned properties that doesn't have to be in industrial land necessarily, but can still accommodate some of the larger users that we are getting inquiries from, and being able to put them in there. So, and to Ben's point, some of the older properties, the properties that have been built, they're Class C buildings. They're just, again, they were built in the 70s. So some of the newer advanced manufacturing, that's not going to be able to accommodate them. because they need, certain electrical capacities and things like that for what they're working on. So again, it's what are ways that we can encourage some of this new, unique usage of just regular commercially zoned land that doesn't have to be in an industrial zoned parcel necessarily, but how can we work with those developers to say, this is a need, we are seeing demand for this type of usage, and let's put in a single-story flex building that can accommodate that type of thing.
I appreciate that, and what I'm hearing are two different strategies, essentially. One is to encourage the redevelopment of aging infrastructure that you just noted, and then the preservation of existing zoning. I suspect we'll have a lot of conversation about that. Two priorities, clearly housing and economic development. We have not yet had a conversation where they converge in such a way. Do we know what the timing of that conversation would be, or do we know when? I don't know what the update on those conversations or planning. You wouldn't know. Okay.
Oh, we're talking about like some of our master plans that were, okay.
The concept.
The conversations are happening.
Okay.
The plans are both underway. Nothing has been, the formal recommendations haven't been put out yet. So,
we won't get them until probably next year at least.
Okay, that's the timeline I was just trying to get ahead of, but there's plenty of time for that conversation. Thank you for the presentation again.
Thank you so much. I honestly think this was very informative, and we should continue as going along the theme of conversations. Continue to hearing challenges that you may hear from people who want to come here to Montgomery County, but they're not able to because A, B, and C. If there is any type of incentive that you hear in other communities in terms of, light industry zones and all that, that we should know about, just keep us posted. You're the one talking to companies. We're not doing that. That's you. That's your job. And as long as you let us know to help you, just as we did with the office to housing issue, we should. And we're about to do with the retail study. We should also be doing it here, so we can close the loop. With that, thank you so much for your time, and this committee is adjourned.